Welcome to the ShortTooth channel, where today I'm going to be doing the much anticipated review of The Dark Knight Rises. This is something that I've been waiting for a very, very long time, as I'm sure all of you have. 7 years ago, I think it was, Christopher Nolan brought out Batman Begins, which was a fantastic reboot to the Batman franchise. I'm not a fan of reboots. He rebooted that son of a bitch well, really, really well. He then brought out a few years later The Dark Knight, and he upped the ante on what all of us were expecting from this Batman franchise. He upped the ante big time and created one of the best films ever made. One of my favourite films. So there couldn't have been more anticipation, more excitement, more anxiety that I felt before going in to see this film. One of the most anticipated films of my life, or at least certainly of the last 10 years, whereby I went into it not knowing what the hell to truly expect. I knew Nolan was a genius. I knew the cast was concrete. I knew that he had never let me down before. However, this was the third and final part in what could be a potentially epic and groundbreaking trilogy in cinema. In cinematic terms, he could either fly or he could bring the whole thing down to its knees. Just a mediocre or an okay film would have brought this series down to its knees. It really would have. It wasn't enough to produce just another good film. It wasn't enough to produce just a Batman Begins film. He couldn't pull off another Batman Begins. If he did that, that would be letting the franchise down also. He had to up the ante for a third time. Could he do it? These were all the questions that were going through my head before I went to see the 6 o'clock showing at the View Cinema last night. And my review goes as thus. The plot of the film, as many people and pretty much everyone now watching this review knows, The Dark Knight, Batman has been in exile for years, self-imposed exile. He's taken a fall for Harvey Dent's crimes. He's put his head above the parapet and made out like he was the one who killed Harvey Dent, and he was the one who was responsible for a number of deaths and a number of wrongdoings, just so that Gotham City could believe in someone, could believe in Harvey Dent still, despite what happened to him, despite him becoming Two-Face. Now, we see him at the end of Dark Knight riding off on a bike into the night as Gary Oldman's Lieutenant Gordon does a fantastic speech, talk to his son about why Batman has to leave. Anyway, you know all about that. You want to know about this film. I'm going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but there are going to be a couple little bits that are going to come out. Not massive spoilers, just I'll talk about some specific scenes. I'll try not to give too much away, though, for those who haven't seen it. This film opens up with, well, it opens up with the whole Bane scenario first and foremost, which is pretty breathtaking. You've seen the trailer, you've seen some of the stuff that goes on with regards to the plane and the hijacking of the plane and planes being carried through the sky, and that shot of Bane held up against two chairs in the plane as his legs dangle. That scene is more intense and animated and well thought out than I could have ever imagined, and more so than the trailer could ever convey. It's where we're first introduced to Bane, and I knew I'd heard a lot of things about people can't understand the way Bane's talking. He's got this thing on his face. What's Nolan thinking? We can't understand him. I could understand him perfectly well, about 80%, 85% through the movie. There's about 10% where you couldn't, but you always got the gist of what he was saying, and for the most part, the important lines had clearly been overdubbed in post-production to the point where you could hear him and make it out very well. But anyway, that's the opening scene where you're introduced to Bane. I won't give out too much away from it. Suffice to say, it's hardcore, and it shows you that this man means business. And this man, the Joker was a genius psychopath. This man uses brute force and has immense intelligence and strength on his side. He knows what he's doing. Cut back to Gotham City, whereby Gary Oldman does a very brief speech about Harvey Dent. There's like a fundraising banquet that's been put on at the Wayne Mansion, where Gary Oldman talks about the fact that Dent's Law, I think it's called Dent's Law, has been responsible for thousands of indictments, thousands of criminal convictions in Gotham City. They're all locked up in Arkham now, and it's thanks to Harvey Dent in no small terms. That's what he says. But he knows the truth. And there's some discussions about where is Bruce Wayne. He couldn't make it to this function. He hasn't been seen for 8 years. 8 years he's been holed up in his house. Nobody knows this, but he's holed up in his house, refusing to come out. We see this great shot earlier on in the film as this is all happening outside the grounds of Wayne Mansion. Bruce Wayne's just standing on the roof, and he's sort of glaring down, looking down in the shadows at what's going on. We're also introduced to Catwoman very early in the film. At this point, she happens to be a waitress, a servant girl in the house who's catering the event, and we're introduced to her. Bruce Wayne meets Selena Kyle, Catwoman, for the first time, and it's quite an exciting scene, and it shows Catwoman, Anne Hathaway anyway, how she's going to perform Catwoman in this film. And I must say, I was impressed. I was taken by surprise. I wasn't convinced that she could pull off a very convincing Catwoman. I thought she was going to be very much eye candy for those who were into that sort of thing, but she wasn't. There was much more to her than that, which was great. Now, what we have happening over the first, let's say, 3/4 of an hour of the film is we bear witness to Bruce Wayne, crushed, crumbled, broken figure, who lounges around in his house, very unkempt, doesn't shave, much like me, walks with a cane. He's lost all his passion ever since the death of his childhood sweetheart. He blames himself. He thinks that things could have been so different. She wanted to go away with him. And Alfred is quite prominent in the first 30 to 45 minutes, and Michael Caine does his best Alfred that we've seen in the series so far. He talks to Bruce about needing to get out. He can't be doing this for much longer. Look at you. You're a broken man. Look at what you've become. You need to rest. And he tells Bruce of this fantasy that he had way before most of the events of Batman Begins, when Michael Caine was off in Italy, I think it was. He said he used to go to a cafe, and he used to sit down with a paper, and he used to fantasize that he would look up from his paper and he would see Bruce Wayne sitting on a table further down the cafe with wife and kids. And he so badly wanted that to be fantasy, to be the truth. And he used to look, and he was convinced that it was Bruce Wayne, and then it would turn out that it wasn't. And he wants that so badly. And Christian Bale's Wayne, just like, I can't let it go anymore. I can't let it go. I've got to come back. Basically, he comes back because of Bane, the return of Bane, who is played impeccably by Tom Hardy. I can't say that enough. The Joker was unpassable, unsurmountable. He couldn't have done a better villainous performance than Heath Ledger. He came fucking close, but he was no Heath Ledger. He was no Joker. The Joker had such madcap insanity to him that Bane's villain, the Bane villain, is just too composed to have an actor really bring out the core of him and make it like, wow, what a fantastic performance. It was great, don't get me wrong, it was great, and how Tom Hardy transformed himself for the role was brilliant, but it couldn't match the epicness of Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker. But be that as it may, anyway, around about this time when Bane's sort of making his appearance, and Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne is starting to come to terms with the fact that Batman's probably going to have to come back, we've also been introduced to a new character in the franchise, who's called John Blake, and he's played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He's seen in the trailers a few times. Young rookie cop who's quite an idealist. He's a big fan of Lieutenant Gordon. He's a big fan of Batman as well. He was an orphan himself. He talks with a lot of the street kids, and you can see that he's an idealist. He believed in Harvey Dent also. He believed in Harvey Dent, and still does, because he doesn't know the truth about him. Anyway, all of these characters come together when Bane sets off a series of terrible things across the city. The first in a whole chain of terrible things across the city. I can't really. It's hard to know what to go in detail about, because I'm trying to think about what was revealed in the trailer, like what is known at this point. I think it's quite clear from the trailer that a fire will rise. So let's just say a few fires rise in Gotham, and Batman has to come back, but his knees are fucked. They got no cartilage in the knees anymore. He's pretty much a broken man. But he comes back. He meets up with Lucius. He gets a few things strapped up, and he comes back as Batman. And he intervenes in a robbery which is taking place in Gotham, which brings about a lot of different issues. We're talking about bankruptcy here. There's a lot of issues that go on in this film. I won't say to who, but there's issues of bankruptcy. There's mass robbery. There's charges on the stock market. There's petty jewelry thief. There's opposing global figures who could potentially be sitting on the Wayne boards that we're introduced to. The lady called Marion Cotillard, who I can't remember the name of the character she plays in the film, but she figures quite prominently in the film as well as someone who could potentially be saving Wayne Industries from bankruptcy. There you go, spoiler. I just did a spoiler. Sorry, but you know that's not massive. It's not massive. If the film begins with him pretty much, he's run the company into the ground because he doesn't do anything, basically, because he's holed up in his house. He doesn't do anything. Anyway, be that as it may, it comes to the point where Batman must first face off with Bane. Now, this is an incredible scene. He goes into the sewers. Batman goes into the sewers under Gotham and takes on Bane. Bane is such an imposing, dreadful figure. You fear for your own life, let alone Batman's. And suffice to say, the fight scene between Bane and Batman is one of the most realistic fights I've ever fucking seen. Apart from the fact that it's between two superheroes in like a comic book universe, if you want to call it, despite it being grounded in realism, as Nolan likes it to be, although they're not grounded in realism because they're so elaborate, they simply can't be. But they're as realistic as they can be. This fight was incredibly realistic. Music drops out, punches that are thrown, look and sound real. Now the sound is so important. You hear that sort of that thud. You don't hear that whole thing, that thud, that whack, like you get metal whacking against metal. It's not that. It's thuds. It's thuds. And that kind of hurts. And it is quite loud thuds that sound fucking forceful. And suffice to say, Bane fucking breaks Batman. He breaks him, does away with him, tosses him to the side, just like a used tissue. That's it, and just rocks off. Because it's not a big thing to Bane to beat Batman. Bane has come from a life where he just does things. He kills. He gets his own way. It's not hard for him to destroy people. He just destroys people. And Batman's just another thing that he's destroyed. Just another thing in his way of taking over Gotham. Taking over Gotham and destroying Gotham. And Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne is then thrown into something called the Lazarus Pit. Now the Lazarus Pit, as many people, fans of the comic book will know, figured prominently in this. In those. In this is where Bane came out of. Bane came out of the Lazarus Pit, which was a huge well, which was like a prison, and the way it worked by being one of the worst prisons on Earth is the fact that it was at the bottom of a well, so all the prisoners could look up and see freedom, but they couldn't get to it. So there was the hope, and freedom was so close, but they couldn't get to it because it was so high. But Bane managed to find a way out of it. Bruce Wayne wants to find a way out of it. So anyway, we then have Bruce Wayne languishing in this prison for about half an hour. Of course he will return because this is a Batman film, not a fucking Bruce Bane film. So, while Batman is out of the equation, Gotham goes to ruins. It's run absolutely ragged to the ground. It's terrifying. This is a terrorist we're dealing with. We're dealing with Bane the terrorist. All the while we are dealing with so many new characters and so many different strands and plot stories, it would be just too laborious and too long-winded to go into all of them now. Watch the film for that. But there is a lot of plot, a lot of stories, and a lot of things to bear notice to bear in mind. A lot of tiny things that may seem like they're unimportant, but they are incredibly, incredibly important. During this time, while Batman is out of the equation, we have had Alfred taken out of the equation for one reason or another. I'm not saying he's died, I'm not saying he's left, I'm just saying he's out of the equation. We have Lucius Fox, Morgan Freeman's character, in extreme peril. We have Gary Oldman, who was in the hospital for something quite serious, coming out because of the absence of Batman, and taken to the streets with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's John Blake. Now, while Bane runs rampant across the city, we see a couple of cameos. We see a cameo from the Scarecrow. I won't tell you how or why, but it's brilliant. All I will say is death or exile, which after you've seen the movie will be one of the great classic lines, particularly exile by death. That will be one of the great lines of this movie, I'm pretty sure. We also have a cameo from Liam Neeson's Ra's al Ghul. As many of you will know that he makes a cameo in it, but not quite in the way that I had expected. The whole city has gone to pot, and we deal with the fact that this city has gone to pot over a prolonged period of time, and we see what is going to happen. Basically, we find out that Bane was in fact a henchman of the League of Shadows also. He too was trained by Ra's al Ghul, but Ra's al Ghul kicked Bane out for being too extreme even for the League of Shadows. And as Alfred said, if you get kicked out of the League of Shadows for being too extreme, you're not someone to be trifled with. To which Bruce Wayne says, I've never realised that I have trifled with anyone. But it gets epic and more catastrophic and more tense as time goes on. Suffice to say, Bruce Wayne finally makes it out of the well and returns as Batman. Now, I really don't want to give away too much story, but the last hour of this film is ramped up so much. There is so much action in it. There are many double crosses. There are many choices to be made. There are many characters coming to the forefront, but there are so many great moments to cheer for in this film, particularly one of them, where, as you'll have seen in the trailer, you've got a whole henchman of people that are on Bane's side, Bane's henchmen, storming down the street, and all of Gotham City's police force storming down the other side of the street, and it's quite a nervous, tense face-off as they're coming down this alleyway, and the police are getting close, and just as they're getting close, and one of these trucks turns to fire on the police, we get the Bats, the new vehicle for Batman, coming out of the sky, flown by Batman, just suddenly appearing, and the whole crowd, the whole police force cheers and they go charging forward. It's a great cheer moment. There's several big cheer moments in this film. There's several quite emotional moments in this film, legitimately emotional. And anyway, the big face-off takes place over the last hour, where double crosses are made, where characters must prove themselves, where they must come to the fore, where everything that's happened in the trilogy so far builds to this point, builds to choices. What's going to happen? What is the future of Gotham? What is the future of these characters? And what will determine those? Now, basically, once you get to the end of the film, you are so emotionally drained that you feel like you can't take it anymore, to the point where when you see the conclusion, you come out of the cinema and you are absolutely gobsmacked. You're like, what did I just see there? What did I just witness? It took me maybe 5 minutes to start thinking and talking about it properly after I had seen it. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It was a brilliant and fitting and amazing end to this trilogy. Nolan didn't disappoint. He absolutely smacked it out of the park. He ended it in a brilliant way, as he does. I'm not going to say what I was going to compare it to, but there's something the ending of this can be compared to. It will leave a lot of people thinking. It will be very controversial. A lot of people won't like it. A lot of people will love it. I loved it. I think it's brilliant. The whole film is brilliant. The ending doesn't matter. It's about the whole trilogy and the film as a piece unto itself. It was absolutely, absolutely great. It was emotional, really emotional. If I had to rate it out of the three, I would put it second best at the moment, because I do really enjoy The Dark Knight, because I think that is perfection in every form. Every single thing about The Dark Knight for me was perfection. This, now, I don't want to be negative about it at all, because it was brilliant. As I say, I love it. It was a 10 out of 10. It was a 10 out of 10, but you have to have levels of 10 out of 10 based on which you prefer. What lessens this for me is the fact that we don't have a villain who stands for as much anarchy as we did in the second. This villain has something of a reason for why he's doing what he's doing, which for that reason makes him a little less scary. No less intimidating, no less strong, but a little less scary and a little less... Well, Heath Ledger's was just scary. He was a scary bloody Joker. Also, because there is so much plot in it, it is a little bit choppy in maybe the first 45 minutes to an hour, whereby it flits between a couple of seemingly subplot features which don't seem that important, but then do have importance later, but then you can't help but feel it could have been dealt with slightly differently. I'm particularly thinking of those scenes involving Selena Kyle's Catwoman as Selena Kyle, and some of the things some of her involvement in some of the shady goings on. I think it could have just been handled a little bit better. But, you know, maybe I'll change my mind on second and third viewing, you know. It was amazing. It was absolutely brilliant. I can't recommend this enough. It had a real emotional core and heart to it. The second one was emotional for various reasons, but this just strikes to the core of humanity. It's about wanting a life. Yes, you want to save Gotham. We're talking about Bruce Wayne here. Like Alfred. Alfred is the audience's eyes, pretty much. He doesn't want Bruce Wayne to pick up the cowl again and become Batman and risk almost certain death against Bane. Bane is too strong for him. He wants him to just leave, just to stop it. He can't save everyone. Bruce Wayne is convinced he can. And it is so sad in some scenes. Michael Caine is absolutely fantastic. All of the cast are fantastic. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a fantastic character. I find it hard to think what else to say about this film. The score was brilliant. A lot of people say that Hans Zimmer's score, I think it's Hans Zimmer, it swells too much, it's too loud, too overbearing. Nonsense, absolute rubbish, not at all. The visuals are fantastic. Brilliant and bold choice by Nolan not to make this 3D. I'm so glad. No need for it to be in 3D. No need at all. It was absolutely perfect and impeccable in 2D because the story speaks for itself. The acting, the script, the directorial work, the camera work, everything speaks for itself. You don't need the 3D visuals. It's unnecessary, and I'm glad he chose not to do it. It was a brilliant film. What more can I say about it? I just hope that if Warner Brothers do decide to take on the mantle that Christopher Nolan has let down now and proceed with another 3 films, another trilogy, that they do it right and they do it differently and they don't try to emulate and they don't try and bring any of them back. This trilogy, no matter what they do in the future, sits now unto itself. No matter what they do in the future. Even if Nolan came back and Bale came back, which they wouldn't, this trilogy sits unto itself, and it is one of the best trilogies of all time. Of all time. Me personally, I'm trying to think of film trilogies that I really, really love. The only one that I really, really love that I can compare it to, trilogy we're talking about here, is the Godfather trilogy. And I would have to say, and be completely honest, that I would happily be watching these Batman films over that. So I have to say that this is the greatest trilogy, my greatest trilogy. It's the best trilogy I have ever seen. It's the most fun trilogy, it's the most thought-provoking trilogy. It's incredibly well written. What I will also say now is that I cannot wait to see what Christopher Nolan does next. I cannot wait. Nothing's been announced as of yet. We know that Christian Bale is going to be moving on to some smaller, low-key things, which he said he would, because he wants to sort of distance himself from the Batman thing now. Understandable. What the fuck is Chris Nolan going to do now? Where'd you go from this? After doing Inception, he did Inception after Dark Knight and before this. Now what does he do after this? I can't wait to find out. I can't wait to hear your guys' opinions on this film either. I can't wait to enter into discussion with you lot about it. I want to talk about so many different things that I can't talk about in this review because there's things that would act as spoilers. Maybe in time we'll have a chance to actually discuss some things. Maybe in a couple of months I will release a video whereby I actually bring up some topics for conversation, because there are many. There are many. This does answer more questions than leave questions, which is a good thing, but it leaves enough to be interesting and thoughtful and stand the test of time. Guys, I don't really know what else to say about it. I'm not going to waste much more of your time now. I hope you enjoyed the review. I sincerely advise you to check out this trilogy. You will not be disappointed. If you are disappointed, very sorry, but don't know what the hell you were expecting. This is the best trilogy and the fitting film. The film we deserved after The Dark Knight. We deserved this film, and Nolan didn't let us down. Go and see it. Go and watch it. Go and recommend it. Go and review it on your channels, and go and talk to me about it. I've been ShortTooth. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Watch The Dark Knight Rises. It's fantastic. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.